Hi everybody, this video is going to give you examples of what APA in-text citations look like. So be sure to like and subscribe below to keep these videos coming. I'm going to use a student sample essay as an example to show you what in-text citations look like. So this is easiest to do when you already have your references page done. I always tell students the best thing that you can do as you are doing your research is go ahead and do your reference entries for every source as you're doing your research. When you are writing your essay, ultimately, if you decide not to use a source, you can just delete it from the list. But if you are trying to use something in your essay and then realize you've forgotten where it came from, it's very hard to go and try to re-find your sources. But if you have your references list already done because you've been collecting them as you've worked, then you don't ever have to sort of face that issue. So I'm looking here at a student's references page, and you can see that all of the entries are listed in alphabetical order. They are all double spaced and they have hanging indent. Any links are live links, so they are blue and underlined and they're hyperlinks. If I click on them, it will open the actual source. It's important to have these because this is what drives your in-text citations. APA uses the author date citation system. So the author's last name and the year of publication must be included in the actual essay. Now you can do them in parentheses at the end of sentences, or you can use them in the actual essays. And you can say something like Achterberg, 1985 in parentheses, found that whatever, and you finish your sentence. Or you could incorporate the year into the actual sentence. For example, in 1985, Achterberg found that blah, blah, blah. So either way you do that is fine, as long as you remember author year, they must go together. Okay, always for APA. Now I want to show you some examples. So let me scroll up here to, I'll start on page 4. It's a very long essay. And we'll go over headings and all of that later. But I wanted to show you the difference primarily between quotes and paraphrases. So APA says that for paraphrasing, just the author and year is enough. However, for quotes, you must include a specific location for that quote. And usually that is a page number. Sometimes it may be a paragraph number or a section number, or a section title would also work, but it has to have something. It cannot have just the author year. Here's a good example of an in-text citation. Notice that it had two authors, so you use the both authors' last names. This is a parenthetical citation, so it is in parentheses before the period at the end of the sentence. The periods always get moved to after parenthetical citations. And it includes the two authors' names, comma, and the year. Now, on the next line down, you'll see a quote incorporated into the paragraph. When you do that, you have to have the author and year, of course, but then you also include a comma after the year and that specific location for the quote. For example, P period 850 notes that this quote can be found on page 850. Now, this is a parenthetical citation because it is included in parentheses at the end of the sentence. You can also do a narrative citation. That means that you worked the author's last name into the actual sentence that you wrote. Here's an example of that. Note, however, that the author still has to have the year with it, okay? This one says Holds Lund, parentheses 1988, examined effects of blah, blah, blah. So author and year are included in the actual sentence here, and that's fine. The year could also be worked into the sentence instead of included in parentheses. For example, you might say, for example, in 1988, Hold Lund examined effects of blah, blah, blah. And that would also work. Let's find another good example. Scrolling down, here's an et al. Example. So if you have 3 or more authors, you use et al. In your in-text citations. You know, that's different than your references page where you list all of them. Here, you just list the first author's name, then the words et al. Period. Notice that there is not a comma between the author's last name and the word et. It's just name et al. Period, comma, and then the year. Here's an example of that worked into the sentence. This is a narrative citation because it's in the narration of your essay. For example, Ball et al. 2003 conducted guided imagery, blah, blah, blah. So author's last name, et al. Period, year in parentheses. And again, you could work that year into the sentence as well. As long as the author year go together, you're good for APA. Let's find another quote. Here's an example actually of a secondary quote or a secondary source. This one just says see Mendes et al. 2014 for more because it's alluding to additional studies. Let's look at this one is an example of an as cited in. That is a secondary source. So we're going to look at this particular sentence. Now, the source that this person actually read was Peterson et al. 2011. So if I scroll to the references page, I would be looking for Peterson et al. Okay. However, they want to give information from Edmund Jacobson's work from 1929. So they actually worked that into the sentence. Edmund Jacobson developed progressive muscle relaxation in 1929. Then you have to put in parentheses because if I only read that, I would go to the reference entries and look for Jacobson 1929. And it's not going to be there because I didn't read Jacobson from 1929. What I read was Peterson from 2011. So you have to include a citation for a secondary source here. Jacobson did this in 1929, parentheses, as cited in Peterson et al. 2011. That tells me, oh, I have to go to Peterson and use that source to find information about Jacobson. There's another video on citing secondary sources if you need some additional help with that. Here is, another example of a secondary source. So what I actually read was Peterson, but now I'm going to cite information from Joseph Wolpe from 1960. So in Peterson, what I read was a summary or information about Wolpe's 1960 work. So here I put Joseph Wolpe in the actual sentence, and then the parentheses note his work is from 1960, and then you use a semicolon to separate. That's his work, but it was as cited in Peterson et al. 2011. That tells me that when I go to the references page, I'm looking for Peterson, not Wolpe. Okay. Let's see. Here's another example of an in-text citation with two authors. So you have both authors with the ampersand, comma, and the year. I was trying to find another quote. This is an example of a block quote, so there's a separate video that shows you how to do that. Note that you always include that introductory information with the author and year before the quote actually starts. So Rausch et al. 2006 concluded the following. Block quotes always are introduced with a colon instead of a comma. So you do a colon, then you have the quote. For APA, that's anything over 40 words. It is set off, the whole thing is indented 1/2 inch. You do not use quotation marks with a block quote, and then you must include after the period. It's only time the parenthetical citation comes after a period is with a block quote. You must put the specific location for that quote. In this case, this is page 287, so you put P period 287 in parentheses after the block quote. If you don't have page numbers, you'd have to use something else. Chapter numbers, section numbers, paragraph numbers, etc. It must have a specific location in parentheses, though. Here's another example of multiple sources being cited. So basically, half of your sentence came from Bottomley 1996, and half of your sentence came from Cunningham and Tucko 1989. When that happens in a paraphrase, you put both sources in parentheses with the semicolon separating them, and they should go in the same order that the information in the sentences came. Let's find, I think that might be my only quote example. So APA prefers that you paraphrase whenever possible, and prefers that you not use quotes. So that's why in this entire 10-page essay, there's a single quote. So as you are writing your essays, make sure that you're considering that and understanding, you don't want to be using as many quotes as you might, for example, see in an MLA essay. So I hope this gives you an example of how the author year citation system works for APA, and good luck on your projects, and I hope you have a great day.